Hey there, entrepreneurs. My name is Sushant, and welcome to Truck Talks. This is the show where I interview successful e commerce entrepreneurs, business executives, and thought leaders, and ask them questions about their business story, and also dive deep into some of the strategies and tactics that they have used to start and grow their businesses. And today I'm really excited to welcome Carlos Soto to the show. Carlos is the founder of Nosotros Tequila and Mezcal. Nosotros is a small batch agave spirits brand headquartered in Los Angeles. It is now California's largest independently distributed tequila brand. And today I'm going to ask Carlos a few questions about his entrepreneurial journey and some of the strategies and tactics that he has used to start and grow his business. So thank you so much for joining me today at Trip Talks, Carlos.
My pleasure, Sushant. How's everything today?
Everything is great. So I know I read a little bit about your story online, and it's a very interesting story. Can you share a little bit about how you got the idea for your business? I think it was some sort of a school project or something. And what really motivated you to go into spirits business?
Yeah, I'll take a step back here and kind of give you the rundown of how things happen. So I'm originally from Costa Rica. I was born and raised over there, and then I moved to the US, specifically to California, about 9 years ago. I got really lucky. I got a scholarship to come study out here, and it was an awesome experience. I learned a lot about business, learned a lot about American culture, but more importantly, I learned a lot about tequila. Costa Rica is more of a rum country, so I grew up a little bit more exposed to rum. And when I moved out here, California by all means is very, very influenced by Mexican culture and gastronomy. So you see tequila everywhere, and it really became my drink of choice. And when I was taking my last year of school, I was taking a class that focused a lot on pitching business ideas. So this professor gave us an assignment, and it was come up with a business idea that has nothing to do with technology. And that was in 2015. So kind of taking a step back, that was right when Uber was kind of like at the peak of like everyone's adoption, that everyone was freaking out about it. And every class I would take, it was like, I want to do the Uber for this, Uber for that. So our professor was like, guys, like forget about your phones for a little bit, like just put the thing down. It's too much. And he gave us the assignment on a Friday, and we had to pitch in on a Monday. So I went out that night with some friends, and I was sitting at a bar, and I was drinking a little tequila. And for the first time, I paid attention to how many people were coming to the bar and ordering tequila, and it sparked a little bit of interest. So I looked into the industry, saw that it had been growing by a really interesting CAGR. I think at that point in time it was about 15% over the course of the last 5 years. And bear in mind, this was like before every celebrity and their mother had a tequila brand. That's something we've seen very, very recent in our industry. But there were a lot of legacy brands. So, the old school tequila brands that kind of make you feel like you're in an hacienda and like very, traditional Mexican heritage. As I was doing the research, one thing I discovered was there's a lot of like environmental issues that were happening in our category. So I pitched the idea of starting a brand that would be one, more youthful, two, less like legacy style, but still keeping a lot of like the old school techniques of making small batch, high quality products. And three, that would have a sustainability focus to it, because there was a whole sector of our industry that people weren't talking about. And from there, every time I'd go out afterwards, I'd be like, man, I could really be drinking my own stuff. And it got to the point where I just had to figure out if this could actually be a thing. So I ended up going down to Mexico. I spent about a month over there just learning about the process of tequila, visiting different farms, different distilleries, met an awesome family that's been in the industry for over 80 years. Started working with them, creating some samples, brought them back. And we did some blind tastings, and there was one specific profile that we had created that was absolutely insane that people were really, really enjoying. And by the time I was about to graduate, we had a brand name, an identity, the taste profile that we really liked. And it really came down to making a decision of whether or not I was going to pursue this as a life career, right? Or if it was just going to be like a bit of like a fun side project that I was working on. And especially being an immigrant, there's like some visa stuff that I had to work through and everything. So at that point, it was really like when I was like, okay, let's jump into this.
So as you said, the assignment was don't go for a tech business. But ultimately, like, do you consider your business to be a more of an e-commerce business selling this product tequila, or is it more that your sales channel is really the liquor stores and you have to distribute the product to the stores to sell them?
Yeah, it's interesting because from like an actual sales standpoint, most of our sales are 100% in the physical world. Because alcohol is still at a state where you walk into a store and it kind of becomes like let's go for a drink, let's go buy a product, right? But there's such a big component that really follows the pathway of e-commerce in the sense, especially for like a brand like ours that's up and coming, and it's talking about like the discovery, right? You talk about leads, you talk about like how do you go through the process of finding your consumer, and we're in a really saturated environment. So really finding people through the e-commerce platform, even though they're not necessarily making the final purchase there, it's digitally that we're finding most of our consumers that are interested in more small batch products, and they don't want to keep drinking what they've been drinking for a long time, or they're willing to take a risk into a category. I definitely see, like, from the discovery side of things, it's a huge part of our business, even though the actual final transactions happen a little bit later on.
Okay, so it's more about brand awareness and really just educating people on your brand and the product, and then they go out and buy it. I'm very interested,
Only about 15% of our sales are actually fully e-commerce.
Okay. I'm very interested in that month where you went to Mexico to really do the product research. I mean, that definitely shows that you wanted to do the research and learn about the product, even though you knew, or you knew what tequila is. Can you share a little bit more about what that process was like? Did you just reach out to some of these distilleries that build tequila and build appointments with them? Like, how did you actually make that happen? Just that learning experience. And is your tequila, is the product really all manufactured in Mexico, or is it really a US? Are you building it in US?
Yeah, so all manufacturing we do in Mexico. We have, as of right now, we have 3 main SKUs. We have a 4th one that's actually coming in later this week. But we have tequila and mezcal. So tequila we do down in Jalisco, and mezcal comes from Oaxaca. So 2 different regions, and we work with 2 different groups basically to create the product. In terms of how Nosotros started, the tequila side, to be completely honest, I knew absolutely nothing going into the industry. So I basically just wanted to become a sponge, right? Like, we'll go in there and like really understand how everything works. And tequila has an appellation of origin. If you're familiar with that term, it's basically kind of like champagne from France. In order to be called champagne, it has to come from Champagne. Otherwise, it's only called sparkling wine, right? And there's a lot of other spirits around the world that have that. And tequila very much has that. There's an actual town called Tequila in the state of Jalisco that it's kind of like the starting point for all of tequila. The experience was awesome. I honestly had no expectations whatsoever. Went in and just did a lot of tours, a lot of visiting, a lot of going to different places. To be completely honest, I sat down before going and just started Googling a bunch of stuff and trying to understand how the industry worked. And I called people, and I was basically telling people that I was like representing a fund, that I really wanted to see if there's a possibility there to go out there and build a brand with them, yada, yada, yada. I landed in a very lucky place, in the sense that the one of the families I met, which they've been in the industry for a long time, super sweet, generational tequila makers. Their master distiller really opened the doors to sit down and create something that was different. And in tequila, a lot of things that a big thing that people don't realize, it's actually very similar to wine, in the sense that a lot of like the areas where you harvest really determine the taste profile and the flavor and everything. So, a big part of this journey down to Mexico was, how can we do something that's different than what everyone else is doing in the industry? And what we ended up doing was that we blended agaves from 2 different regions. So in Jalisco, you have the highlands. The highlands tend to be a little sweeter, a little bit more citrusy. And this is a direct result from more exposure to sunlight and less water because the water kind of flows down. Then you have the lowlands, also known as the valley. The valley tends to be a little bit more peppery, more earthy. It's a direct reflection of all that water kind of coming down and being in the bottom part. It makes the agaves a little bit more herbal. So Nosotros is actually a blend of 50% from the highlands and 50% from the lowlands. And that what this yields is a very balanced taste profile and very unique taste profile comparatively speaking to a lot of other tequilas in the market. That was really what, at the end of the day, what kept us in business. After graduation and, I started my visa application process and I took out a loan from Bank of America to start the company. It was $18,000 at the time. It was the most I could get out of my credit card. But it was just enough to do our little first batch down in Mexico. And we brought it up. And the first 4 or 5 months of our company's history were absolutely miserable. We couldn't really get any sales. But right at the time as I was pretty much packing up my bags because my temporary visa was about to expire, this taste profile that we curated earned us an award from the San Francisco World Spirit Competition. And it was that outside validation that really kind of gave it to us. It was we ended up winning best tequila of the show across all categories and competing against like every possible brand you can imagine. And it gives that outside validation. So people started reaching out and I was able to go full time into the business after that. But it all came down from that trip down to Mexico, right? It was like, let's go and figure out how everyone else is doing it and let's see if there's a way to do it differently.
That's very interesting. So you just basically took this risk with your money, and if you had failed, of course, you would have lost your $18,000. But you never know what can happen, and that one thing kind of changed you and gave you the exposure that you needed. Were you so what happened after that? So initially, were you selling e-commerce, or were you still like, how were you getting your first customers at the beginning?
So liquor in the US has a really intricate e-commerce structure. So it is the alcohol laws in the US are very, very tight in the sense that there are a 3-tier distribution structure. So legally, we can only sell wholesale. So meaning we can only sell to a distributor that then sells to a retailer who then sells to a consumer. However, there are some digital e-commerce solutions that basically use some of these licenses. And we found the system where it basically allowed us to bypass some of this while still being compliant with the law without having to work with third parties. And yes, some of the very first sales that we put out there were actually through these systems of e-commerce and being able to tell people like, hey, here's the product. What's the biggest issue with our category? A lot of times when people want alcohol, they want it now. It's not a thing that they're like ordering in advance unless it's a specialty item that you've like been hunting for or something like that. And thankfully we fall a little bit in that category in terms of being like a small batch and like a treat. But a lot of the volume also does happen outside of the e-commerce world, right?
So
as we've grown, the divide has definitely separated more towards the retail side.
So as you were saying, this is really a saturated market, like the market of tequila. It's not necessarily a new product. Who is the target market for this brand? Is it just, everybody who drinks? Is it really about, them discovering your product and they're saying, let me try this new brand out, let me try this new flavor profile, and then based on that first experience, either they're going to be a repeat buyer, or if they didn't like it, they'll stick with whatever they were doing before. How do you find your customers, and how, can you share a little bit, if there's anything unique about the customers that buy from you?
Totally. I think the biggest thing we realized early on was, we're never going to be able to beat some of the people that do mass volume products. We're not a price. We can't compete in price because we simply are a craft product that's going to be more expensive than most tequilas out there, right? Our target demographic is definitely somebody who has a little bit higher of a discretionary income. We're not a cheap product by any means. You know, you look at our line of products; they start at $45, go all the way up to 140 in range, and kind of gives you that idea of like where we operate, right? Under that understanding, we realize too that as a small business, sometimes you can't try and fight the big guys and try to outmarket them, right? In our category, and I'm saying our category as liquor, not only tequila, but just like alcohol at large, a lot of people drink what they know. They don't necessarily drink what they like, they drink what they know. So meaning a lot of people go to the bar and they'll order the beer that they heard last, or the beer that they've been buying for years, or a lot of people are a little bit doubtful about stemming out of their way. Same with spirits. You go to the bar and you might order, the tequila you might know for a little bit, or you might order the scotch that you've known for a long time. So that really, what we realized through that is there's a whole niche of people that are used to buying certain products that if we can convert, they're going to be loyal for a long time. So how do we go about converting these people within our target demographic? Huge thing is blind tastings. We'll try to push as many blind tastings as possible, especially on a retail level. And that's for obviously the real world component. From an e-commerce standpoint and from a digital standpoint, how do we grab people's attention? That's where you bring in a lot of the other parts of the brand, right? Like talk about the sustainability, talk about these things that differentiate us from other brands. And contrary to some of the larger brands, our problem is not necessarily the second purchase. A lot of these first big brands get the first purchase, but then the quality doesn't take them to the second purchase. Our biggest challenge is always getting that first sale in, and then the second one and the third and the fourth come a lot easier because we know we have a high quality product. To kind of wrap up your question, our demographic is definitely a consumer that has a little bit higher of a discretionary income. Somebody who's willing to take a risk and try something a little bit newer. And in terms of the age range, we found that this profile of consumer usually sits between like 25-year-old all the way up to 60-year-old, in the sense that it really depends on what channel we're talking about, like which one of our product selections really we're targeting, right? Which has been really interesting. Also seeing like the spread of demographic depending on the SKU that we're talking about.
So there's definitely a blind tasting element of it, and I'm very interested to know how you set that up. Like the retailers that you're working with, you basically say, do you need to have your own people there standing there and helping people taste it, or how do you set that up? And then the next question that I'll ask is really around, how do you brand, how do you create the awareness around this product, really making it a more of a luxury product that someone would buy. So I'll go into that next, but very interested around the blind tasting aspect of things.
For sure, the blind tasting is just it was a result of really looking at our brand and seeing like, hey, what is our strongest suit? What is that one thing that we know we feel completely confident about, and it's a core competency, and it's like a core strength of our brand. The answer for that was really easy. It was our taste. So we made the decision, hey, like let's double down on that. Let's get as many people tasting it, and that'll really make an impact. We call it the liquid to lips, basically. How do we go about that? As you mentioned at the start, we're the largest self-distributed brand in the sense that we have our own sales team kind of going out and about. And what we've really accomplished is actually ourselves, our whole team, going out there and spending 2 to 3 hours at a time at a point of sale and telling people, hey, what are you looking for? Tequila? Yeah. What are you looking for? Oh, I'm looking for this brand. Oh, I'm looking for that brand. Do you know where it is? Yes, we know where it is, but would you be willing to do a blind tasting against that bottle for something that we can tell you it's you're probably gonna like better? And most people don't say no to like, hey, let me taste some tequila. It's like, it's not like unless you're like dead set on the brand, and then that's totally fine. But most people are pretty open to the idea of tasting and just seeing how it goes and comparing taste profiles, and that's been really one of the strongest things that we found.
In terms of branding and really, I know you mentioned that a lot of that occurs online. Can you share how do you establish a brand that is more of a high-end brand in a very saturated space and getting people, familiar with your brand name, your logo, your identity, and everything else? Can you share a little bit about that?
For
How
sure.
you started, how you started it from the beginning, and what lessons have you learned along the way?
For sure. What we realized is we started with the quality. That was the first thing. And obviously when this started, we didn't really have the community that we have now, or the brand aspect to it. It was more so just the product. And then we started building on top of that. What is the big appeal about Nosotros? You look at the name Nosotros in Spanish means us. When you start from that premise, then why do people drink? At the end of the day, it's a social experiment. It's bringing people together. It's lowering your guard down and connecting at a deeper level with one another, right? So we took that idea and we're like, how do we get this and really make it the ethos of our company? And we're about building connections and bringing people together. And then we pair that with the main things that we really see our brand and where do we see our brand coming up. The one thing we realized there in that environment is our brand is not it's not a, hey, I'm at the club with like the flares and all this type of thing. It's a bottle that you open on special occasions with friends, and it's something that you cherish, and it's something that you're doing things that are a little bit more, unique. Actually, let me bring in one of the bottles over here just to show you something really quickly. So one thing that we found a lot of success with too is on the back of the bottle. This is our Blanco, for example, is our first base SKU. We have a space that's an open, creative environment. This is something that we did for Valentine's Day, and people have really enjoyed that because at the end of the day, it's who you shared it with or a special creative outlook. Kind of having that space has been really cool with the name. And we've built brand on that. We've been brand on community of bringing people together, really focusing on the health and wellness space too. Funny enough, we do a lot of stuff with yoga studios. We do a lot of stuff we worked with a lot of brands out there that focus on that category. And the really cool thing has been that public has received this really well. And through building this community, you've basically been adding people to our network, and it creates a little bit of a network effect where more people are drinking Nosotros and enjoying Nosotros in a healthy and balanced way. Versus some of our competitors that focus too much on like the clubbing aspect or the whatever aspect, right?
Cool, very interesting. Are you online? Are you on social media? Like, what kind of advertising, what kind of marketing campaigns work the best for you in terms of awareness and also driving sales?
For sure. Yeah, we do use a lot of social media. You can find us on Instagram at Nosotros. Our website, nosotrostequila.com, YouTube, TikTok, we're in all that stuff. It's tricky because as a brand, you need to find that balance between the point of how much are you posting a day, how much are you selling, and like what's your value proposition to the people that are following you, right? What is the value proposition that you're creating for someone to be like, oh, I want to follow a brand versus a person. The whole idea of social networks and everything was created so you could follow people that you care about. And then the whole concept of brands were added to this. And at the end of the day, you need to have like a bigger and larger presence there to make it worth it, right? So what are the main things that we do online? We focus not only on selling product. Obviously, that's a component of it, where we run paid social and we run giveaways and we run newsletters and incentives and everything. But we also focus on, for example, creating cocktails, like stuff that, hey, like this is a cocktail that if someone sees, they might want to make, and this is why we do it with Nosotros. Share with your friends. We focus on doing events, lots of events that then we share through our social channels, and then then people come into real life, and it's basically a value add for them for social following on our social. What else? Events, cocktails. We do a lot of like informational stuff. What we found out too is there's a huge gap in between consumers of agave products or spirits at large, and really the understanding of how a spirit is made, for example. like a lot of people don't really understand like how does it work, where does it come from, what are the differences, like what are things in the industry that are okay, and like we talk a lot about that because at the end of the day, if we can really talk about like how things are made, we can really separate ourselves from the more industrial brands, the brands that are producing, you know, millions of cases on a regular basis, and they're very industrialized product versus what we're doing, which is a lot more small batch and more curated and a little bit more artisanal. I'd say those are like the main four things that we focus on our social, and obviously just trying to keep engagement at the highest level to really create that sense of community. It all comes back down to that. It's how do we really create a community around our brand.
What does your team look like right now? And a lot of your marketing and branding and all these things are in-house, or do you work with like outside vendors also?
I'd say 99% of everything we do is in-house. The main reason for that is just a matter of quality of presentation. I think when we're able to do it in-house, we have a much better understanding of what the brand needs and what the brand is about. Versus if we outsource things a little bit too much, sometimes we lose a little bit of like the heart that you're looking for, right?
Now, I know you did mention that you started this business not knowing if it's going to be a part-time thing or this is going to become your life's work. Looking back, what are your thoughts? Do you think that this is kind of like your life's work, or this is you're going to build this brand, you have an exit strategy? What is your vision for this business?
It's wild, man. It's wild. I mean, it started as a school project turned passion project turned life project. Now I'm obviously fully invested into this. It's been we've been officially in business now for about 5 years. We've grown into 4 different countries and just continue growing the brand. I think as of 2019, we did do a little capital raise that just helped us float some stuff, and from there, we haven't really done anything else. The goal is definitely to keep building and keep growing. The category is hot, both in tequila and mezcal. There's a lot of growth that is happening in the category where people are learning more and more, and the interest is peaking. It's really funny looking at some of the studies, at least here in the US, where tequila as a category is actually stealing a lot of market share from vodka. So we're obviously happy about that one. But the goal is definitely to keep building and just continue taking the brand to more and more places. We've opened a few markets in the last year, like a few different states. Every state in the US has different regulations. But now the next 2 to 3 years are really going to be about depth. How do we focus on getting as much depth as possible and really going into these places and finding the right partners to work with, right? We work much better with boutique restaurants, for example, people that care about what they're serving and what they're putting in front of their customers versus, maybe some chains that are focused a little bit more on the bottom line.
How do you think about, so you built your brand around, this tequila mezcal product. Now, of course, you have some brand recognition in the market and, your business is growing, you have cash flow and so forth. How do you think about just building this product line versus adding new product lines so you can have, maybe add additional revenue streams? Do you ever think about, let's just maximize what, the products that are working right now, or do you ever think about, can we add new products to the business also?
100%, man. I think, we're a lifestyle brand by all means of what we're doing. As long as it's aligned with our ethos of building community, 100%. It's something we would definitely explore. To give you some examples, we've done a lot of collaborations in the past. We worked with retail brands. For example, we worked with a company called New Republic. They're a shoe company. We did the specialty shoe. It was like a Nosotros New Republic branded shoe that came out. Came with a bottle of mezcal, and it was awesome. If people loved it, and we're always looking at things like that. We do a lot of apparel too here and there that people really enjoy, and it's all about the brand. We started doing some more and more in the event space type of thing, and kind of creating that physical world for for the e-commerce, kind of connecting the bridge between the physical world and the e-commerce platforms that we have. It's fascinating, especially coming out of a pandemic, how open people are now to like actually go out and about and experience things at a physical level. Because I feel like we have like a bit of a hold there after a year and a half of just being completely shut down, and then obviously depending on where you live, that's a different conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I know in every business, every entrepreneur's journey, there's always some mistakes, lesson learned, failures. Could you share maybe your biggest mistake while growing this business, or a big failure, and what did you learn from it, and what can other entrepreneurs learn from that?
And there's plenty of mistakes that we've made. We've had so many, thankfully, enough positives to keep us in business as the mistakes going to happen, right? I think a big part of what we've learned, and a mistake that we did at first, was really not focusing enough on the human component. For our type of brand, and this may not apply to all businesses, but for our type of brand, there's nothing more important than the human capital, the people behind the brand, the people that are out and about putting the face out there. We've come to realize like finding like the right brand fit in terms of like the people who represent the brand and that work with us and that really go to bat every day to build Nosotros has been the most important thing. And we kind of switched a little bit like to focus on that versus before we were focused a little bit more on some other stuff. And it's made a huge difference in the last 2 years. We've been able to really build a really, really awesome team.
So, but you're the main founder, right? You don't have any co-founders in this business.
I do have a co-founder. His name is Mike. He actually went to LMU with me and here in LA, and we went to school together, and we've been friends for a long time. His background was a little bit more on the finance side of things. Michael Urbanas, and he it's just been funny because we kind of have like we have a healthy marriage in the sense that I'm very type B, he's very type A. He definitely focuses a little bit more on keeping things nice and tight and the number side of things and whatnot. I'm a little bit more on the operation, a little bit more on the creative side. But with that said, obviously we've learned a lot of stuff from one another, and it works.
Cool. Now I'm going to move on to the other segment called the rapid fire round. And in this round, I'm going to ask you a few quick questions, and you have to answer them maybe in one word or one sentence. So the first one is one book recommendations that you would make to entrepreneurs or business professionals.
Sapiens. It has to be Sapiens. I think that book, and sorry, I'm gonna give you a little context why. It's a book that has not much to do with business, but it's just the backstory of humanity and where we come from and how we think. And I have to say, like, that book changed entirely the way I see life and the way I see business, because at the end of the day, every business you see is a direct reflection of people. And understanding like the psychological triggers that everyone has is quite interesting.
An innovative product or idea in the current e-commerce, retail, or tech landscape that you feel excited about?
Oh, it's going to be blockchain.
Okay. A business or productivity tool or software that you would recommend, or a productivity tip?
Productivity side, I would say, a business. I'd say it has, yoga. It has to be on the mental side. Focus on doing yoga and finding a way to meditate and keep your body working. Nothing's gonna give you better productivity than keeping the body working.
Are you a yoga practitioner?
I love yoga. Yeah, I've also had some back issues in the past, and yoga was the saving thing that I found that would really fix everything, all the physical problems I had before.
Cool. A startup or business that you think is currently doing great things?
I don't know if you can consider it a startup still, but I absolutely love what Square Block is really doing. the different reaches and things that they're going into is quite remarkable. And I'm a fan of Jack Dorsey as a leader too.
Cool. A peer entrepreneur or business person whom you look up to, or someone who inspires you?
Definitely my co-founder, Michael.
And best business advice you ever received or you would give to other entrepreneurs?
Best business advice would 100% have to be, there's these words from a professor that I had in college that said something that for some reason it always stuck with me. He goes, in business, when the heart is not beating, don't worry about the bleeding. Which means you need to focus first on making sure your company can stay alive before you start doing all the bells and whistles and all the little things that's happening on the side. I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs get out there and fail because, you know, they focus too much on doing huge marketing things and all the fun and all this stuff. And then the backbone of the business is not there, and the flow, the cash flows are just not there. And focus on your core product first and focus on building the main structure of your business, and then everything else will fall.
Cool. And then bonus question, since you mentioned blockchain, I'm curious, are you using blockchain in your business in some way, or are you like a crypto investor or something?
We have some stuff in the works, nothing we can publicly share yet, but definitely part of what we're looking at. It's just it's, you know, both Bitcoin and blockchain and for different purposes and use cases. It's going to completely change the way we see the world and the way we're used to interact with things. That's something I'm really excited about, and we're definitely putting some efforts in that direction.
Perfect. Carlos, thank you so much. Those were all the questions that I had. Thank you so much for sharing your time, for sharing your story, and all the business strategies and tactics that you shared with us. Really, really appreciate it. So yeah, thank you again for joining me today at Trip Talks.
Thank you for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Cool.